If you don't mind, folks, we're going to start with a little preamble here. When the trial ended and the verdict came in as we expected, it was a rather emotional time for Chris, his friends, and his family, so it was not a time for Chris to respond to questions that the media may have. But what I'd like to do here today is to try to let you know that this is not an opportunity for the media to once again be prosecutors, not you being prosecutors, but to take the place of a prosecutor or to take the place of a police officer. There was a very well-trained and a very well-experienced Bath Police Department who investigated this case. There was a very experienced prosecutor, in fact, the chief assistant criminal prosecutor for the city of Akron. He didn't need any help. Now the verdict is in, that issue's over. What we'd like to do today is provide you the opportunity to hear Chris's reaction to that verdict and what he's been through. And I'd like you, if you could please, to confine your question to that, not to issues about the trial. Okay, Chris first would like to begin to say something to you generally.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank the jury, first and foremost, for making that decision. Anytime you stand in judgment of another person, it is a weighty proposition and something that should be taken very seriously, and I think they did a really good job doing that. And I thank them for their time and for the seriousness with which they applied their judgment to my case. And I want to thank all you gentlemen for being here today as well, for giving me a voice to help me get my thoughts and my inner dialogue out to the community. And I want to thank Mr. Burden as well. And for the record, I've trained hundreds, if not thousands, of police officers across the United States at a federal, state, and local level. And I hold police officers in the highest of regard. Matter of fact, those training scenarios that I constructed and put on for these police organizations were about helping officers to survive deadly force encounters on the street, and also to be better shooters and to have better equipment so they can come home at the end of the day. So I want to reiterate that I was never a cop. I don't want to be a cop. Please don't ask me to be a police officer. That is the toughest job on the planet. As a SEAL, I began every day with the a priori knowledge that it was my job to prevent people from having birthdays anymore. As a police officer, you don't have that luxury. You walk into many situations and scenarios, oftentimes agnostically, and the situation can turn on its head pretty quick. So I applaud the efforts of the police department, and I also applaud the jury, as I said, and they made the correct decision and the right decision. I've maintained my innocence the whole time, and it was the right decision.
Now, if you, ladies and gentlemen, have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Are you going to request the Bath Police Department to reopen your case and to look for whoever did this to you?
I will leave that up to them. I don't meddle in police matters, so that would be up to them.
Do you expect it, though? Do you expect it that this
I would hope that they would continue to try to find my assailants, absolutely.
Chris, what would you say if you knew that they considered the case closed?
Well, I would be okay with that too, but when a case is closed, we've always heard of cases being reopened down the line when new evidence presents itself. And I would certainly welcome that. I would love to face my assailants, absolutely.
Chris, how tough has this been on you and also on your image across the world and your financial, your business ventures? How tough has it been?
Scott, it's been very, very damaging. I lost a substantial amount of money in the first 72 hours when I was called a liar and basically tried in the court of public opinion on the day that story broke. As a matter of fact, I was assured that I could get to the police department and answer to the charges and be processed before that happened, but that was not the case. I was given word that that would happen, and then the opposite happened. In my line of work, I call that an ambush, and that's what happened to me. So it was very disturbing and distressing, Scott. I won't give a dollar amount, but it was very, very substantial. I will say that. 7 figures, without being too exact. It was a 7-figure loss over the course of the last year.
Well, you pride yourself on being a patriot, pride yourself on telling the truth, and the Bath Township Police Department came out and said you're a liar.
That's
What's the question?
Yeah, what's the question, sir?
I guess your reaction to that, I mean, you've established a career of being a patriot, taking a stand for what's right, for justice and for truth and for honesty, and obviously your supporters and social media supported that throughout the trial. But you have a police department who came out and said, basically, you're a liar. I just want to know, what was your overall feeling about that?
I'm going to interrupt here if I
Sure.
can. He doesn't want to characterize the Bath Police Department because that consists of a variety of people in very different walks. Some are experts, some are officers in the field, some are detectives, some do administrative roles. So that's not a question I think he ought to answer. I would prefer that you just accept the fact that he's very upset that this ever happened to him, and he's not blaming people, he's not going to charge people with doing something bad.
Scott, yes, I'd just like to get off the X, as we call it. Just move on, onward and upward, as I always say, and just stay positive. I think this is not the time for mudslinging or accusations. What's done is done, and I want to leave it all on the table and just move forward.
So there are always going to be people who doubt these verdicts, who believe that maybe the police were right, that a story was made up if no other reason to save embarrassment. What would you say to those people who still don't trust in this verdict?
Well, there's always going to be naysayers, and the court of public opinion is a very vicious and malicious court. I think we have, as a nation, have lost the whole concept of innocent until proven guilty. Social media allows us to be what I call keyboard commandos and throw darts and sniper rounds at people from the safety of your own home and a keyboard. It allows people to be very outspoken and opinionated because they never have to face the people that they're throwing these accusations at. So I understand the psychology behind it, and it's the world we live in today. But I would just ask people at home to, if you're in doubt, if you still have doubts, Channel 5, I believe, live streamed the entire court proceedings both days. So request a copy of that and take 16, 18 hours out of your life and watch it. Maybe that'll change your opinion. But I'm not going to try to sway your opinion here. You know, we all say you can't please everyone, and that's the truth. And nor am I trying to. You can't sleep at night when you go to bed thinking, geez, I got to please everybody. No. I try to do the best that I can for my business partners, for my family, for my fiance, for my country and my community. I am a patriot, and I will defend the United States from enemies, foreign and domestic. That's what I swore to. And as far as I know, that oath is still on the table that I took. And that extends to the city of Bath, the city of Akron. I hold no ill will toward either of those public institutions at all.
Chris,
yeah.
talking to one of the jurors yesterday, they said they didn't necessarily believe you on the stand, but that the prosecution didn't prove that you lied either. Given that, did that make you feel any more nervous during the trial that you may or may not be acquitted, and moving forward, and having that thought in your mind that the jury felt that they didn't necessarily believe you? Should people out there believe that this is the truth?
Well, I would say that a verdict that was 8 in favor of not guilty and 0 in favor of not guilty kind of disproves the very words that that juror spoke on record.
And that juror joined in that verdict in 35 minutes. That usually is the time it takes to elect a foreman.
Well, what juror was saying is that the prosecution didn't prove its case, but they don't necessarily believe what you said either.
I doubt that that one juror represents the views of the others. I say that because part of the instructions given to a jury is that every time you have interrelations between people, there is room for some possible or imaginary doubt. We accept that. We all live in a world. What is not true is that this person deep down believed that he was guilty. I don't think she or he said that. There's going to be some doubt because what do we have? 2 days of continuous testimony in this case, a year of evidence in this case. So it would not be surprising that something within that evidence might cause doubt. But it doesn't mean they have doubt about his innocence. That's something entirely different. The answer can be different depending on how the question is phrased. And I'm convinced in my mind that those jurors individually and collectively believe two things: that the government didn't prove their case and that Chris was innocent.
And that the story was all completely accurate? I think they believe, contained in that, do they believe his entire story? I guess it's a question because innocent is different than not guilty, is what the prosecutor said.
You know something, I'll bet any amount of money if this was a loved one of yours, you would never ask that question. You'd be willing to accept that the jury who found him not guilty truly believed in what they said. You can always say a person is not innocent. You can always say a person maybe was guilty. But that's not the world that we live in. That's not the judicial system that we have. And I can tell you the rules always change when it's something personal. If you were there at the trial and you heard me speaking in closing argument, I talked about what reasonable doubt is. It's requiring the jury to make a judgment in the most important of their own affairs. And that's what they did. And my feeling is that the most important of their affairs would be, I believe that Chris Heben was innocent as well as being not guilty in the law.
Chris, how much of an emotional roller coaster from the beginning when you were shot, which is obviously very traumatic, to where you are right now? Can you just talk a little bit about that, about your emotions throughout it?
You know, it was, I kind of liken it to being in purgatory and having your mouth sewn shut. And you know, as a SEAL, someone who's disciplined and controlled and taught to temper the good with the bad, from weather conditions to just people around you, I had to just roll with it and deal with it and suffer through it, suffer in silence. And you know, but no matter how bad a situation is, it can always be worse. Thankfully, I wasn't going through this, I wasn't an innocent man sitting on death row for 30 years. Wondering when my day was going to come every day. Was I going to die that day? And then I get exonerated in year 30, and I can't even get compensation for that $5 or $10 a day that I made while I was in prison for 30 years waiting to die. So, Scott, no matter how bad a situation is, you can overcome adversity by just knowing and believing and thinking that, you know what, it could always be worse. I got to be home every night with my fiance and my son and running a business with some amazing business partners. So there were some highs and there were some lows, and I would think that's normal. That's normal across the spectrum of humanity. So. And do you have anything to say to all your supporters out there? Because if you look on your Facebook, your Twitter, your website, obviously you had a lot of support throughout this trial. Yeah. You know, I'm thankful for that every day. When I read that, it's funny. I try to always be inspiring when I make a post. Sometimes I'm humorous, but the underlying message is, as I said before, onward and upward. Accelerate your life, be the best you can be every day for your family, faith, community, and country. So people don't realize this, so I will state on the record that when you inspire people on a daily basis, they often give you that inspiration to inspire them, if that makes any sense. So yes, I was really, really pushed on and pulled to a higher level by their support, and I am very thankful for it.
It was mentioned a moment ago by Mr. Burden that 30 minutes, 35 minutes, the time it usually takes to choose a jury foreman. Were you surprised by that at all? What were your thoughts when you heard after 30 minutes, after a half hour, that there was a verdict? Well, my business partners and I walked across the street to grab some coffee because I hadn't eaten in about 6 hours, so I was hungry. And I'm just getting the coffee in my hand, and I got a call from one of them, and he said, "You need to hustle back up here. The jury's coming in." And I was like, wow, that's either very, very good or very, very bad, because I don't have any experience with trials. And so that's the first question I asked Jim when I sat down. I leaned in and I said, "Mr. Burden," I said, "is this, in your experience, is this a good thing or a bad thing?" And he said, "In my experience, it's usually a very good thing." So that reassured me. But I tell you what, I knew in my heart of hearts that I was innocent, and that is my personal rock in my psyche that kept me confident throughout the whole trial.
Chris, what happened with, I'm just, I was going to say, during the closing arguments for the prosecutors, they sort of alluded to that they thought you had shot yourself and that you had done it to get attention. Now that you've had a couple of days removed from that, what are your thoughts about what they said?
Well, you know, I don't want to malign anyone. As Craig Morgan did a job, and matter of fact, before the jury deliberated, when they were dismissed to go into their jury room, he came up to me, and I thought it was very up and up for him to do this, and he extended his hand and he said, Mr. Heben, I just want you to know that I'm merely doing my job, and this isn't personal, and I'm sorry that we had to meet under these circumstances. So, and I realized that that was a good act of humanity there. He extended himself, and I accepted it and shook his hand, and I'd like to just move forward, and I don't hold any ill will towards Mr. Morgan, and I believe what he said, and that's fine.
Chris, you were on television before this all happened.
Yes, sir.
With the Montrose Ford Group and their
Yes, sir.
advertisements. Could you explain what happened there afterward, after the arrest and things, and what's your current employment now with them in association?
Well, sir, I was never an employee per se of Montrose Auto Group. The owner of Montrose Auto Group, Mr. Mike Thompson, and I are business partners. He's one of my partners in SEAL Team Consulting. So we had this wonderful idea, and I believe it's a wonderful idea, to show support for the veterans in our community with a slogan that we developed, "We leave no customer behind," and that's kind of like a loosely alluding to the military's principle as Americans, we leave no soldier behind on the battlefield. So we thought it was a brilliant slogan, and I still think it is. But when this story broke, when I was tried in the court of public opinion, we pulled those commercials to protect the business interests of not only SEAL Team Consulting, but first and foremost Montrose Auto Group. So I don't know, we haven't really had a discussion about the plan to continue in that line or to go in a different direction, and that's certainly not my decision, because I do not own Montrose Auto Group. I'm the CEO and founder of SEAL Team Consulting, and then I have my company Invictus Media and Television Group, or Invictus Group. So the SEAL Team Consulting is where I do the motivational speaking and the executive development and personal growth for everybody. And I also train police officers and the layperson under that consulting company and provide
And your
security.
office is there at Montrose Auto?
That is one of our locations, yes, on the top floor of that facility.
So you're not under contract, paid contract in any way or form with Montrose Auto, correct?
No, sir. Oh, and I want to say I read your article. I thought it was the most accurate and the most fair, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to do that as well.
Appreciate it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess that's probably it since the questions slowed down. I thank you for coming here today. It's not likely we're going to get together on this case again. Chris is going to go back to his life. His family's here, his friends are his business associates here, his fiancée are here. That's where he's going, that's where he's returning, and he will not come back.
Thank you for your
Thank
time
you
again,
again.
gentlemen. Thank you so much.